Hi guys, welcome to Reddit Rabbit Hole. Today, we are looking at the question, what is the most controversial thing you own? Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, so YouTube gods are pleased. Without further ado, let's get started. I have an old Iraqi bill with Saddam Hussein's face on it. It's worth about 17 cents according to Google. People bought a bunch of Iraqi money after he was gone thinking it would be worth money one day. Don't think that worked out very well. Give it more time and they eventually might be. Like 40-50 more years. I had a friend who bought thousands of dollars worth of the Iraqi dinar and used to always tell me he was going to hit it rich when it got revalued. I think he is still waiting. I mean, there's still plenty of time law. Might not be worth anything now, but who knows in 50 years. It's definitely an interesting piece of history, and that's all I can ever see it being bought as. Can confirm. I was overseas during the invasion and asked for $5 worth of dinar. Ended up with a briefcase full. Buying money from a crumbling government to turn a profit. Must be the same brainiacs buying NFT. It might be worth something in a long time. It's like the people being mad that the Star Wars collectibles they bought when The Force Awakens was in theaters isn't worth a bazillion dollars now. Even the stuff from the original film is mostly the small runs mistakes or unpopular toys that are now rare. The mass-produced collectibles aren't going to be worth anything until most of the rest of the production is broken, and only if Star Wars is still a big thing then. The hilarious thing is it was never going to work, and they just invented a complete fantasy of Donald Trump somehow unilaterally declaring a foreign country's currency to be one value with the US dollar. Currency speculation is a real thing, and anyone in a position to rebuild a country's financial system is already wise to that scam. That's why they never just honor the old bills, and instead introduce an all-new replacement currency with a brief exchange period where they take the old bills for a set exchange rate. That sort of depends. I have worked with a company who sold the current currency, dinar. People bought it up speculating that it would gain value due to Iraq having oil reserves and after they rebuilt, would be a successful country. Things didn't quite turn around like they thought. In fact, I know a few people who prefer to not talk about their investment. The old Saddam bucks were never going to have any real value since it is no longer legal tender, as I was led to believe. I have a few and they are kind of neat, but it will never have any significant value. On a long enough time frame, it'll be valuable. As fewer and fewer bills are in circulation, money increases in value. Not as currency, but as a collector item. It's just that depending on how much got printed and how many people are hoarding, it might be a long time until it's worth anything. Bit late to the party here. I have a red t-shirt with a half-completed game of hangman on the front, which if you fill in the missing letters spells Saddam. Apparently the guy selling them got ordered to stop, so you can't find them anywhere fake. My friend acquired it but was too scared to wear it in case a pro-Saddam immigrant went mental at her. In my 20s back then, I thought it was far too funny to stay hidden in a wardrobe. In my 30s now, I still have it, but don't tend to wear it in public much. My grandfather went to the World Scout Jamboree in the Netherlands in 1937, and while he was there he traded patches and gear with some scouts from Germany. By 1937, the German Boy Scouts had transitioned into the Hitler Youth, so I own a Hitler Youth Boy Scout uniform with a bunch of swastikas on it. Oh my God, the 1937 World Scout Jamboree. My dad was old AF when I was born, so he was actually around for the 1937 Jamboree. Unfortunately, he didn't get to go to the Netherlands because he was 1 year too young to be eligible. He was still salty about that in his 70s, lol. But he used to sing the Jamboree song all the time in Negen Dry Zeven /Dan Zoel Gwat Beleven. /Dan, kom to Jamboree naar Nederland. Holy shit, that unlocked some unexpected memories on a random Tuesday afternoon, haha. That is such an interesting thing to own, holy shit. Don't get me wrong, I hate Nazis, but that's kind of cool to still have, considering how much of that would have been destroyed, and just considering the history behind it. A complete ivory and ebony chessboard bought a sale of confiscated poacher stuff to fund elephant preservation. When I lived in Zambia and was on holiday in Kenya. My dad bought it, and I got it as a hand-me-down. We were friends with someone who owned an animal sanctuary and their security had shot the poachers as far as I remember. They had a parentless baby hippo as well. It stole my sister's chewing gum and tried eating their cat. It was moved further away from the main houses after it tipped over their Land Cruiser. When I was 18, I bought a print of a 1918 German zoo advertisement from a thrift store. I thought the artwork was neat. It had a leopard on it and I was completely cat-obsessed at the time. Turns out the artwork was by Ludwig Holbein. He would go on to produce Nazi propaganda. The cute leopard poster I have hanging in my hall was designed by a Nazi. Coincidentally, I ordered it from a Berlin atelier. He was certainly not alone. A lot of German artists were propagandists. The movie M was written by Fritz Lang and The von Harbu, and basically deals with the social dilemma of choosing between a floundering but legitimate government and thugs who get things done, but who use tactics that aren't ethical. Lang would emigrate to the U.S. before the war really kicked off. Von Harbu stayed and worked for the Nazis. I wanted a chinchilla really badly as a kid, but my parents said hell no. One Christmas my grandma got me a teddy bear made out of chinchilla fur. Luckily my parents told me it didn't hurt the chinchilla, it's just like getting a haircut for them. But they were like WTF to my grandma. I now know better and am also like WTF grandma. I have a chinchilla. Sometimes I catch him staring at me as if he is plotting my demise. I have to remind him I could totally turn him into like a quarter of a glove if he tries anything. Then I give him a chin scratch and a rose hip, and all is well. The U.S. had a former Nazi, Wernher von Braun, leading their rocket program and built the Saturn V rocket that put men on the moon. I wouldn't feel too bad about a poster since, as you mentioned, didn't have anything to do with Nazism. Nah, I don't feel bad about it. I am an active anti-fascist, and anyone who might see it will already know that it's not a reflection of my politics. It's a just start conversation piece whenever someone comments on it. And anyway, it's not like I put him on my payroll, cough, U.S. government cough. It is hard to acknowledge that some of the arts produced during the regime of the Third Reich are impressive. But if regarded disconnected from the historical background, there is architecture, clothes and artwork that is quite captive. I think the most important takeaway is 1. That such artwork does not necessitate the existence of that form of government, and 2. Such artwork can be admired for its artisanal qualities while acknowledging and reiterating that it does not constitute support of the regime it came to existence under. When I was a kid, I collected coins. Somehow I came into possession of 2 coins from Nazi Germany. I live in Canada. Yes, there are a lot of brands the Nazis used that are still going strong today. Fanta was invented because they couldn't get Coke ingredients past the trade embargo into Germany as well. Ernst Haeckel is a zoologist who did some pretty cool drawings that would be much more well regarded, not for biology but art, if he were not a eugenist. Yes, his work is beautiful, but I would not necessarily fault him for being a eugenicist. Literally everyone was after Sir Francis Galton extrapolated on his cousin's work. Eugenics was just a widely accepted way of thinking. The Holocaust was the first major event to challenge eugenics in the popular conscious. Before that, people were just like, of course, certain people shouldn't be allowed to breed, yes. He is complicated individual complicated by the time period and state of the world. Still, I won't own or display his work. Hell no. I'm ardently anti-Nazi, but I'm a huge history buff, and I have a particular interest in Germany during WWI, Weimar, and WW2. It's hanging in my dining room, and whenever someone comments on it, I am very upfront about the history of the artist. And anyway, if we destroyed everything that came out of Germany from 1914–1945, we wouldn't have things like magnetic tape, NASA, and Volkswagen. Seriously though, it is difficult to overstate how much of modern life is impacted by ex-Nazis. My family owns a petrified walrus penis. My grandmother took it to get it identified at the Smithsonian several decades ago. Apparently her grandfather, or maybe it was her great-grandfather, brought it home after he spent several years on some type of expedition up around northern Alaska and points north. It has been loaned out to several museums at different times. The family has talked about selling it, but everyone has to agree, and so far there is no agreement about selling it. So I own 1/67th of a petrified walrus penis. The Aleutian name for these is Inusik. They are very commonly used for scrimshaw, and you used to be able to buy them decorated in souvenir stores all over Alaska. I imagine the petrifaction is what sets yours apart from the common. Thanks very much for this. I had to look up both the word scrimshaw, art carved on bone or ivory, in case anyone else is interested. Plus I got to read a really interesting Wikipedia about penis bones. That's a whole thing I knew nothing about. Have a non-petrified, one Usik, that we use as a fishwhacker. It makes a fine ivory club. I heard about a murder that took place in a small village in Alaska. The killer used an Usik to bash his friend's head in when they were drinking. The DAs and assistant DAs were both from the lower 48 originally, and each desperately wanted to be the one who prosecuted the case. Because how often do you get a chance to try a murder case where the man was killed with a walrus penis? I was watching Tusk while my wife was sitting next to me reading. She looked up just in time to see Tusk in his glory and got really freaked out. She still can't open the bedroom door without listening for walrus noises first. My eyes picked out the words "points north," and all I could think was, that must be handy for the walrus. It has a built-in compass. I'd love to see a letter from a museum requesting it to be loaned to them. Could we please borrow your petrified walrus penis? We will give it back when we're done. 1/67th. Oof, quite the family you have there. I'm not sure my family is even half this large, even if we're talking from a great-grandparent family tree level. My dad had a friend whose dad had a walking cane that was made from a petrified bull penis. I only met the dad once, but because he used the cane regularly, I got to see it. From a distance, it looks like a bougie burled wood cane. Then you get up close and it looks gross, like a mummified penis, with balls at the top and everything. Correct. It takes millions of years for even wood to become petrified or stony. I seriously doubt they have a walrus bacul in that old law. How does this work? Is there a public 67-person vote? Do you know who wants to keep the penis? Is it the money, or do they just like having it? Who gets to hold on to it with the shared ownership? Is there some kind of timeshare system in place? It's called an USIC. Honestly, prob not worth that much most likely. Source: I am born and raised Alaskan. My family member has one that's been in the family also. Unless it's been harvested by someone with tribal status and gifted. If you're going to harvest walrus for its meat and ivory, you might as well keep and preserve the whole thing and use it for artwork. My grandparents have a whale penis. It's this weird, 3 long slightly curved piece of white ivory, with ornate caps in each end. I used to swing it around like a sword. On guard. I went on a trip to Alaska with my granny. I was 18 and she had previously lived in Alaska for a decade, and the restaurant had walrus tusks on the wall with a bone displayed underneath. My granny said it was an USIC and asked me if I knew what it was, and I didn't. I asked what an USIC is and she said, "It's a walrus wanger." I asked, "Why is it made out of bone?" Without hesitation, Granny replied, "Because that's what mommy walrus is like." My granny is the best. I have a set of small bone-carved snuff bottles from China, dated to the 19C, with explicit images on them. They're kind of curiosities in themselves, but when my in-laws separated my MIL, called my husband, and asked him if there was anything in the house that he wanted, and he said, "Nothing but the explicit snuff bottles." She took them and left them with a note that said, "I've left you. Please don't contact me again." I'd taken the snuff bottles. They were the only things in the house I liked. After their separation, we got all sorts of controversial hoardings, including a suitcase full of ivory and an abundant collection of Enid Blyton's first edition books. She asked if I'll never speak to her again. They'd eventually resume communications, but for ages my husband was the awkward link between the two. FIL was distraught, but also extremely confused. Also, FIL kinda deserved all this. He was well connected to the Sri Lankan government, and whenever he'd get angry or threatened to use his connections to hurt MIL family. On my wedding day, I got a cryptic message from some dude in Sri Lanka, and when I googled his job, it turned out he was a member of a special task force that has been accused of war crimes. An uncut DVD of Caligula. I am not sure if it is still banned or not. An ornate Boer tobacco jar from the 1800s. My great-grandfather looted it off a dead militiaman during the Second Boer War. A first print edition of Batman Damned #1, the one featuring Batman's Little Batman. From DC Black Label, featuring more adult content. Violence and swearing are totally fine, but a shadowy penis profile made people flip out enough they removed it from subsequent print runs. You guys are some creative fucking people with your bat penis puns. Love it. I've got a copy of such in Stevens, Illinois, with the original cover that featured Superman flying over a city. Turns out the label never asked DC if this was cool, and it was not. Future pressings had it removed. What is the purpose of having a bottle of histamine? Do you plan on assassinating someone? Elma, are you sure about that? I used some a while ago in the lab, and the safety looks very okay. LD50 for a mouse is 200 mg/kg, would be around 10 g of histaminer for a 50 kg human. I'm pretty sure there are things in your cleaning cabinet that are more toxic. I don't think I have it anymore, but back when I was in ninth grade and my brother was a senior, we hosted a foreign exchange student from Norway. Without us knowing, he had been taking pictures of every overweight/obese American that he saw while he was here for the year. It wasn't until a year after he went home. On Christmas, he sent us a leather-bound photo album. Like, it looked really nice. Opened it and boom. Hundreds of photos of people from Walmart and malls. My mom was not too impressed, but me and my brother had a good chuckle. Not even at the people, but just the fact that he took all the time and energy to collect all those photos and then make them into a photo album. Oh man, this really cracked me up. It's got to be a wild ride, being from somewhere like Norway and going to a Walmart for a couple years. I made a hobby of taking photos of roadkill I discovered while biking around. Sometimes I posed the bodies even. Anyway, super gross. So I collected all the photos and put it into a photo album with a pretty flowered cover and titled it God's Little Book of Animals, and gave it to my brother for Christmas. Norwegian here. I was also totally amazed about the amount of overweight people in the US the first time I visited. There's overweight people in Norway too, but not as many. Documenting them with photos is taking it a bit too far though. On Canadian, we have fat people here obviously. My friend is 6'0" and 280 pounds. He is almost always the biggest guy in the room here. We crossed the border to Buffalo to go shopping, and literally riding 5 miles of the border, he much closer to the average size and is never the biggest guy in the room. It's obviously just anecdotal, but it's not that other countries don't have obesity. It's the level and number of people who are obese in the States. These replies are seriously giving me perspective on being an American. Ty for share. I've been trying to change my weight, and you don't think about how much of it is systemic here. It's difficult to not be a little overweight here. Every food is loaded with preservative, fast food is on every corner, the corn industry, drinking culture being normalized and combined with every event, restaurant portion sizes, a health industry focused on keeping you sick and treating symptoms rather than root causes, if you can even afford the healthcare. I could go on forever. We scream fuck cancer and heart disease as loud as we can year over year, but change nothing. What do I even do? It's very easy. Cheap is kind of a myth. At a fast food restaurant, you can easily feed a family of 4 for $30-50, depending on the place. Seems cheap, but you're feeding them garbage, so the value is low. It's also less food than if you spent the money at a store and prepared it yourself. For that same $1.40 or so, you could buy 1-2 pounds of good quality meat, fresh veggies, a starch/carb of your choosing, and feed the same family of 4. Y'all have a much higher nutritional value, better feeling of fullness. I'm ready for more food to HRS after fast food, and you might even have leftovers. So it's kind of a combination of paying for convenience, time equals dollar, and another systemic lifestyle expectation of working all day every day, coming home, cooking, cleaning, etc. There's often no time or energy, so fast food fills the gap. So much would need to change here. As a Canadian that in the past had to eat cheap, post-university in Toronto, paying high rent, low starting wages, and some debt, but into running marathons, I was grateful for all the diversity of great food from the immigrant groups that was very affordable. There were so many options, but I will never forget the grandmother for Lebanon that had a small shop. She would fill up my takeout with super healthy food and tell me that I was too skinny and needed to eat more as she piled on an extra heap of whatever delicious dish she had prepared that day. It did me for dinner and then lunch the next day. Toronto is amazing because of these opportunities. Edit, not opportunities, these great people that know how to keep it real. Edit 2. After I moved to another hood and returned to visit her, a corporate shawarma chain store moved in next door and was putting her out of business. Fuck this world and all its shitness. My great-grandpa was a medic in WW2, and we own a little chest with his personal belongings, including his diary, some old bandages, and 3 vials of 1940s morphine. There is a pharmacy museum in Curo TX that is absolutely incredible. The building was purpose-built in the late 1800s as a pharmacy and used for that for over 100 years, and they managed to hold on to all of their old inventory. They have tons and tons of bottles of heroin, morphine, cocaine, and the like, as well as all sorts of quack medicine, including one product you gave to your baby if the baby was too ugly. My 26.5 scale 8-string guitar is apparently super controversial to every guitarist I've ever shown it to. I have my grandfather's Hitler Youth knife. He was 12 when the war ended, but he spent the last year or so of the war on a U-boat, basically as an assistant. Edit. This comment blew up, and I wanted to give some background.